Hi everyone again. Our fall colors are quite stunning this year and every year. And the trees around me, the colors have changed, but it's hard to really see up into the canopies. But we are in our Thanksgiving weekend, and this Thanksgiving weekend has really snuck up on us, on me at least. And it's in my calendar, the date's there, but with our situation, our social gatherings and our family gatherings have all been canceled, so I haven't really had much headspace to think about celebrations like this. And it's really been hard, I think, for me and for all of us not being able to connect, because I really do miss out on our family and our church traditions. Normally, at this time, Michelle and her mom, they would have been planning for weeks already. They'd be planning, replanning, making trips to the grocery store to create this wonderful Thanksgiving feast. But this year, things are a little bit different. Actually, the thing that reminded me about Thanksgiving was a picture. It was a picture that came across my news feeds, and I will show you that. Let's take a look at that picture. Pretty creepy looking, eh? So this is not faked, it's not magnified, it's not photoshopped. When I saw it, I thought, this looks like a massive feng zhao, a chicken feet. And this was an actual claw that was uncovered by a group of archaeologists. They were inside a cave system in New Zealand when they came across this frightening object that they saw. And when they stumbled across it, they didn't even know what they found. It looked like an enormous dinosaur claw, and it wasn't fossilized. It was in flesh, still with scales and skin. And so they took it back to their labs, and they discovered it's over 3,000 years old. It had belonged to a prehistoric bird called the upland moa. And it was basically a giant land bird, probably the biggest land bird that ever existed. And it is huge. You know, some of them grew up to almost 10 feet. They had no wings, no tail. So being Chinese, I was wondering, how many families could this bird feed? You know, on Thanksgiving, it probably feed an entire village. So here we are in Thanksgiving weekend, and we are gathering, but the tradition is interrupted and we are adjusting. I heard that it's been impossible to find turkeys in Toronto. Well, let me correct that. It's been impossible to find grocery store turkeys that are 6 to 7 pounds. So it's hard to find small turkeys because they become like toilet paper. And it's because no one is doing these big powwows. So now there's a surplus of these giant 10 plus pound butterballs. So everything's changing. Supermarket, processing plants, and farmers, they're all having to adjust, and everyone's having a difficult time. So as we enter into this weekend, I do feel some sadness. In honesty, I've been feeling a little bit down. I've been feeling a little bit gray because we've been having to make all these adjustments and changes. And I know that I'm going to miss out on another family gathering. You know, I think I'm actually okay with making all these adjustments, but the constant change, when things all are added up, it's actually quite a lot of changes that we've been making. And it feels like I'm losing something. Things aren't the way that I would have liked them to be. So I know I should be thankful during this week and the week that we're approaching, and I really am. I am thankful for God and for His providence. And there are so many things that I am thankful for, but somehow it feels like I'm trying to wade through this thick fog that's all around me. And I know I'm heading in the right direction. I know the sun is behind there somewhere, and I know it'll eventually poke through. And my hope is steadfast. I know that. But somehow the weight of wandering in this unknown place takes a heavy toll. And I know some of you are feeling this way too. It's been a hard year for many of you. You've had to deal with some very deep losses in your own life. And so I lament with you. And I want to say, it's okay. It's okay to feel this way, even as Thanksgiving approaches. And I think we all have things to lament over and to be sad about. And when we do this, I think sometimes as a Christian we feel guilty about it. We feel guilty to name our disappointments. We feel guilty to say that we've lost things and we don't feel happy about it. And these could be plans or opportunities or something that you've been looking forward to. Or even simple small things like the weekend coffee with a friend. So I feel as if we have to put on a good face. Sometimes we feel that we have to make others think that we're all good inside. But I want to say it's okay. It's okay to lament. We need to feel the freedom in our own private spaces, in our own private prayer life, to name these things and to be sad over our losses. And as we enter into our Thanksgiving, I want to look at a few Psalms. And in these Psalms, we'll see a range of emotions which include lament, praise, and gratitude. And that's where I want to take us. We want to enter this Thanksgiving weekend being honest with our feelings, with our losses, but knowing and still know that we are thankful and we trust God. So let's, again, look at laments, name our losses, our disappointments, and then we'll move into gratitude towards God. Lament. Let me read one of the Psalms, Psalm 25 from verse 16. Look toward me and have pity on me, for I am alone and afflicted. Relieve the troubles of my heart and bring me out of my distress. Put an end to my affliction and my suffering, and take away all my sins. Behold, my enemies are many, and they hate me violently. Preserve my life and rescue me. Let me not be put to shame, for I take refuge in you. So, this is a lament. And what's lamenting? I think the most simple definition I read is this. A lament is a religious ouch. A lament is a religious ouch. Very concise and very descriptive. So lament is basically saying ouch to God. It is the outpouring of your inner pain and sadness and disappointment. And this kind of prayer is very common. It's very common in the Bible. In fact, a third of David's Psalms are laments, cries to God. And here's some of the ways that he writes. He says, out of the depths I cry out, O Lord, hear my voice. My soul is utterly terrified. But you, O Lord, I ask, how long? So these are David's laments. And I think if we were to modernize the language, it might sound something like this. I'm at the end of my rope. I can't hold on much longer. I don't understand what's going on, and it makes no sense to me. I call to you, Lord, but all I get is your answering machine. I'm calling out to you, but you seem so far away. How long? When is relief going to come? I think this hits home for us. We've all experienced God's absence, and we feel alone and confused, and we doubt. And this is normal. It's expected. It's a part of our faith walk. And it's perfectly okay to express our raw, uncensored emotions. And I often think we feel guilty about this. We feel guilty and we think, I shouldn't feel this way. I should have gotten over this. This shouldn't be a big deal. I shouldn't be complaining. So why do we feel guilty when we have these negative emotions? I think one reason behind it is because we're surrounded by what some people have called a culture of positivity. So what's this culture of positivity? Well, have you ever pretended to be happy when you're not? You know, you've seen a post of a friend's picture, a holiday photo, and they're smiling, but you know that in their family, she's going through a lot of stress. So this is unhealthy positivity. We feel this pressure to come across as though we're living at our best and it's smooth sailing all the time. So what happens is we tend to cover up our true feelings. We try to portray ourselves as if we're happy no matter what. And We have to always think that we have to look at the bright side all the time and so quickly. And when we do this, we truly minimize our own feelings and honesty of how we feel. So I think lamenting corrects this. It corrects maybe a naive or simplistic understanding of our faith. Your spiritual life will have good days, but it will also have some bad days. And things will sometimes look bleak, and there's no sense of direction even. So faith isn't just right thinking or the proper theology or knowing the verses to quote. Even Paul, the great theologian, he says he was perplexed and confused. 2 Corinthians 4:8, we are pressed on every side by troubles, but we are not crushed. We are perplexed, but not driven to despair. So these spiritual ouches, these are not weaknesses or failures of faith. Lamenting is actually faith. It's a sign. Our doubt is a sign that our faith is still alive. We're still kicking. We're still hoping. And deep down, we know that our relationship with God is real. When you are depressed, when you're down, when you feel frustrated and overwhelmed, what do? Who do you go to? Who do you talk to? Well, you talk to your spouse. You go to a brother or a sister. You go to your best friend and you complain. You pour out your heart and tell them how frustrated you are. And this is the same for our spiritual life. It's okay to complain, to go to God, even when we don't feel that God is very close to us. He still cares for us. Like Paul says, we're not driven to despair. We're not driven to despondency because God is far away or apparently seems to not care for us. I know that for me, lament opens up my heart to listening. Sometimes as I listen and lament, God will point out to me my error. He'll show me that I need to change my attitude. Other times he'll highlight a scripture for me. And sometimes he'll just be silent because he wants me to grow in patience. Okay, so from lament, we do move over to gratitude. And this seems like way over on the other side of the spectrum. We know that God's world is created for us. It's deeply flawed, it's broken, but it's still his good creation. And we're constantly having to pivot and to adjust at this time. So I think it's important for us to pause. I think it's important for us to take pause for self-reflection so we notice God. Let's look at Psalm 34. It's a little bit longer. Psalm 34:1. I will praise the Lord at all times. I will constantly speak of his praises. I will boast only in the Lord. Let all who are helpless take heart. Come, let us tell of the Lord's greatness. Let us exalt his name together. I prayed to the Lord, and he answered me. He freed me from all of my fears. Those who look to him for help will be radiant with joy. No shadow of shame will darken their faces. In my desperation, I prayed, and the Lord listened. He saved me from all of my troubles. For the angel of the Lord is a guard. He surrounds and defends all who fear him. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Oh, the joys of those who take refuge in him. Fear the Lord, you his godly people. For those who fear him will have all they need. This is so uplifting and so inspirational. And this is the same David who lamented and complained and described his misery and feeling of abandonment. But here, he's exploding with joy and thanksgiving. And you would have thought these are completely two different people, but they're the same. So, what happened? Why the sudden change? Well, I think part of it has to do with his humanity. We're human beings like David was, and we're all temperamental. We're inconsistent, and our minds and our feelings, they will betray us. So we can see this in David's life and writings. He was a deeply passionate and emotional man. And in the end, he will be famously remembered as a man after God's own heart. a man after God's own heart. So no matter how thick that fog was, no matter how depressed he felt, he still pursued God. He clung to him, and he could speak of his goodness. So from a human perspective, we all feel gratitude. We have these warm, positive feelings when we recognize that something good has come our way. So recognition of these good things is key for me, for all of us. We need to be mindful. We need to pay attention to the many good things that we have and we have been given. However, if you hardly notice these things, if you don't acknowledge that you receive goodness, then it really is difficult to have a grateful heart. Noticing God and his goodness is a spiritual practice. It builds our joy and our trust. Thomas Merton, the Trappist monk, this is what he wrote. To be grateful is to recognize the love of God in everything he has given us. And he has given us everything. Every breath we draw is a gift of his love. So, where does gratitude start? It starts with recognition. It starts with being attentive to God in your life, in your day, in everything. So God is right here. He's not far away on the other side of the world, nor hidden behind the galaxies in space. He's present with you right now, even as you take every breath. So God is here. When we recognize him and when we pause to notice, we can see, we can appreciate him. And it's easy to miss it. When we're too busy, when we're so preoccupied with life, it's hard to see God. When life becomes just a series of tasks and troubles that we have to navigate, we will miss God. For example, this morning I woke up to the beautiful sun shining in the sky. And some people will feel so happy and grateful for the bright sun. But others are in a rush to start their day, and they will hardly even notice it. So when we notice and see that God is in everything and he is everywhere, we will begin to see his fingerprints are everywhere. But we have to take the time to notice. And when we notice, gratitude will follow. I think of me. I feel that I'm in this fog, and I'm focusing only on the fog that's around me. And I know that I've been swept up with so many changes that I've been having to make. Things like adjusting my time, my priorities with the kids, our daily and our weekly routines. And with all these logistics, I think I haven't taken enough time to notice and to pause and to see what God has been doing and is doing. So I'm reminded I need to notice, to recount, and to see God's generosity. I have a warm home. I have plenty of food. I'm able to share my space with my family. I have their hospitality. I have this technology so I can see you, you can see me, and we can interact. I have income so I can serve my family. So there's so much that I am thankful for. So let me say this. Gratitude is contagious. Gratitude is contagious. And this is one contagion that we want to spread and should spread. So to wrap things up, I want to share with you a story of a young, faith-infused woman by the name of April Tam Smith. She has really infected me with her generosity. I first came across her story this year when she shared about her passions at the Global Leadership Summit. And she has an amazing professional resume. She's the managing director of an investment banking firm. And April, she lives a normal life like you and me. She works hard, she has a full, busy schedule, and she tries to live out her faith the best that she can. And at the core of her faith is radical generosity. Radical generosity. And this is how she was raised when she grew up in Hong Kong. But it wasn't until her first mission trip, when she went to South Africa, that God began to show her a vision for the future. So as she was volunteering and helping at an orphanage, This made her realize that her feelings, her ideas, they're empty unless you put some action to them. So she began to pray. She prayed, she listened, and she began to take small steps, one at a time. Anyways, let's watch a piece of her amazing story.
I think about meeting a woman in the middle of a factory in Haiti, and her hands are entangled with colorful threads, her skills being utilized to make clothes for someone else, and her mind centered on prayers for her family. I think about meeting that woman and feeling connected to my own story. And I remember that the future is woven together, one faithful thread at a time. Haiti was not supposed to be a one-time visit. I dreamt of staying and making a difference. I was given a strong desire to dedicate my whole life to something more. And when I wrestled with that decision, I remember when I went to an orphanage in South Africa, where I met a former engineer who had come to this country to care for orphans. I told him I was thinking of doing the same thing, and he asked me, what if God had more for you exactly where you're at? What if more seniority would allow my giving story to grow? What if influence would allow for me to make a bigger impact than I ever had even dreamt of? So as much as I longed to stay in Haiti, I listened and I paused. Now, I'm actually an MD at a major investment bank on Wall Street. I speak the language of options and futures, implied volatility, and variance swaps. I work in an industry that sometimes might appear to be in competition with charity. My day-to-day is fast-paced and filled with facts and figures, trades and profits. But my purpose is the work that this life of influence allows me to do, the people that it allows me to impact, the difference it allows me to make.
When I work in New York, I think about you guys. And it's really important to me what they're doing here and for me to be able to support you.
God allowed me to find a way to use my influence where I was. One of the most important things I decided to do, and also one of the hardest things I've ever done, it's opening PS Kitchen. At 30 years old, my husband and I, along with 2 other friends, signed a 15-year lease on our first business property in Times Square. 15 years. We risked multiple years of income with no promise of success. And as a 6-month renovation time turned into 2.5 years of nightmare, it really felt like success was so out of reach. There were so many times I just asked God, am I doing the right thing? Did I hear you right? When we finally opened, I once again saw my work entangled with the story of others. We, the founders, pledged to never take a salary or profit so that all the profits can go to charity. We believe in using our influence for the betterment of others. We serve great food, but we also serve as a place of second chances. We often employ men and women who've struggled to find work, maybe because of past hardships or convictions. We believe that people are never defined by their worst mistakes. I'll never forget the moment I met Cerrone, who had just been released from prison 3 weeks earlier. I handed him a card and said, please come back for an interview if you like some work. He did. We hired him on the spot. Cerrone is just one story that represents the countless number of people who have come through the doors of PS Kitchen looking for work and receiving a second chance. The man in South Africa was right. God had more for me exactly where I was. So if you were to ask me, am I supposed to reach the people in Haiti? Will I share live with people on Wall Street? Will I get to share with those who work at PS Kitchen? My answer would be yes. I do not have one place of influence, just like many of you. We all have several areas of influence. And my hope is that all these things will ultimately do one thing: affirm significance in others. Being at Wall Street allows me to produce the funds that I want to radically give to others, but it also allows me to break out of what is considered normal. We exist in a culture that pursue and prioritize wealth, but I really want to work and live for more. So I've invited my colleagues to join me. Coworkers ask me about my trips to Haiti. They sometimes go with me. They help me build schools in Congo. They inquire about being a part of the PS Kitchen story. We make a difference together. When I immigrated to the US as an 11-year-old, I never would have dreamt that this would be my story. But when we're faithful to the things that God has put in our hands, we get to create a better future for everyone. I still think about that woman in Haiti, and when I picture her, I picture my mother. She started working at 11 years old and sat in a factory, her hands entangled with colorful threads, making clothes for someone else to wear and praying for our family. And when I think of my own life and the future people I will use my influence to impact, I remember when we use what is woven together for others, this is how we affirm significance.
Wow, her story is so inspiring. You know, April isn't that different than you and me. Like her, we want to make a difference. We want to do something for the kingdom, but sometimes we feel that we're very limited. We don't have that many options. And I love how she shared, saying that God said to her, stay where you are. Stay where you are. You can do what you're called to do in your place. So she's been sharing her story with all kinds of different organizations, and she's given some TED Talks. And this is one thing she said. She said this: God really honors it when you take the leap of faith and obey Him. We pray a lot of prayers of gratitude, but imagine if the disciples were grateful for the fish and loaves, but then they just held on to them. That wouldn't have been a miracle. So she wants to spread the message of Jesus' radical generosity through service. And she says, she strives for this. She says, I strive for a standard of giving, not a standard of living. And that really stuck with me. I strive for a standard of giving, not a standard of living. So she is truly inspiring for us. God has invited her, and God invites us. He invites us to share in His kingdom of abundance. And when we see and remember God's faithfulness and we see His goodness, then we can be confident He is faithful and He will provide and always will. And I think that we can, as thankful people, we can give much. We can be generous, thinking about a standard of giving that brings blessing to this world. So I pray that God to bless you, to bless us, so that we can bring love and generosity to this world. Amen.